These are some of the best tools that I've bought and used in 2024. Tools are a really important part of what we do, and getting it right makes a huge difference to your woodworking. And like so many of you, I've made mistakes, but I've also bought some gems along the way. And I think I found a tool that you won't have seen before. And it's a good one. But don't worry, I'm not just going to show you a whole list of tools. I'm actually going to demonstrate why they're this year's best tools. And if you're like me, this will help you avoid making the buying mistakes I did at the start. So you'll save some money. Everything you see is going to be linked below in the description, so let's get started. So this first tool is a tool that you will all use. Probably already have. But there's a lot of choices and it can get a bit overwhelming. I touched on this in the last video and I promised to go into it in more depth. So here it is. No matter what woodworking you do, you're going to need to hide a screw head from time to time. Now that's not new information, I'm sure. But there are a number of different ways to do it, some better than others. But first, here are the basics. Whenever you use a screw to hold two pieces of wood together, if you want the best results, you start with a pilot hole. Now, it could be for alignment purposes, could be to avoid slipping, but it's most likely to avoid splitting from the wood you're either screwing through or screwing into. And I know, in some types of wood, just driving the screw in without a pilot hole will help the head sink itself without any splitting. But more often than not, this is not the case. It's far neater and more controlled to engineer a countersink rather than relying on brute force. So here are the options, and importantly, the goods and the otherwises. First one, small drill, large drill. Large drill makes a hole for the screw head to sit in, and then the smaller drill makes the pilot hole. Tips: make the large one first, and then follow that with the pilot drill second. And use a brad point larger drill so it's easier to find center with the pilot. If you've ever done it the other way around, you'll know why I'm recommending it this way. The next is a combo of drill and countersink bit. You see, these come after the drill to bore out a cone-shaped recess for the screw head to sit in. Tested them all in the last video, and trust me, this style is the best for quality of finish. They come in a set of 4, offering you greater flexibility, and it's going to cost you about £15, $17. Now moving forwards, I think we're going to have to accept that there's no one recommendation that covers all bases here. But there are some that are better than others, like the deburring bit compared to its counterparts. So I would say you need one of these in your toolbox. But up next comes the combination bit. This incorporates both the pilot drill and the countersink cutters in one bit. You can adjust the length that the drill bit protrudes by adjusting the grub screw right here. They normally come in a multi-pack, so you can choose the diameter of drill that suits the screw that you're using. And just as a quick aside, that is something that is really easy to do. All you need to do is compare the drill itself next to the screw and ensure the one you're using is the same size or a hair smaller than the actual diameter of the screw minus the threads. I've bought a lot of them over the past year for testing, ready for this video. So a couple of things to check. Make sure that you get the ones that are going to be the right length for what you need. And then after that, it's just a matter of quality. And what I mean by that is this first set that I bought came in a bag. You get 5 different sizes, and you also get 5 spare drill bits. And at £12, the bag of bits is a bargain. But I went one step further and I bought this set in a case for £20. It's slightly higher quality and it's nice to have the storage for it. And I find these combination bits are most useful when a pilot hole is equal or of more importance than the countersink itself. Say for instance when you're drilling through one piece into another, especially if you're drilling into end grain. And even more so if it's end grain of ply, because that is far more likely to split. But if speed and repeatability are the most important factors, as well as consistency of countersink, then you might want to consider these. These are basically the same style as the other ones, but they have this halo around the top. You adjust this and that sets the depth of the countersink. When the desired depth is met, the halo hits the surface of the piece, and while the drill bit is still spinning, it remains still. And that's important because then it won't mar your work. But sadly, I've had great experiences with this one and terrible experiences with this one. You see, the trend one arrived where the drill bit was bent. I straightened it again, and in tightening the grub screw that holds it, well, it bent again. I had no such issues with the Amana. And yes, the Amana comes in at £43, $42 in the US, but I would spend the extra every time to get the extra quality. So to conclude, you can get a good job out of both. You probably need both. But if you're just starting out, start with a pack of these. They'll do everything that you need to get you started. And then maybe down the line, once you decide this is the hobby for you, then upgrade to the more expensive stuff. But we're not done there. All of the methods we've talked about so far lend themselves to either not covering the screw head at all or covering it with filler, which can look a bit plasticky. If you want to go one step further, I recommend considering plugs. No, not those ones. To cover the screw head with a plug, you need to bore out a hole for the plug itself to sit in. Option 1 would be to use the combination bit and just drill in deeper. But what I prefer is to go back to what we talked about at the very start, large drill, small drill. And in doing so, the large drill actually creates a hole perfect for a plug. And if you want to go one step further, a Forstner bit will do it cleaner. But for plugs, I do not recommend store-bought pre-made dowels. They're great for joinery, but they don't give such a clean finish as a plug. I suggest either buy yourself a long length of dowel and cut it down to the size you need, or save some extra money and cut your own. And for that, you might want to use these. These are plug cutters. A set of these will cost you £12, $15. I got these off one of you guys for free, so thank you, Michael. These are brilliant in a pillar drill, and they're pretty good in a handheld drill. Though you do need to leave quite a lot of margin for error, and you will get through quite a lot of wood. But with these you can use the same type of wood to hide the screw head, or even a different contrasting wood to make a feature of it. You can use end grain or side grain, the choice is yours. But if you like these, you're gonna love these. These are self-centering plug cutters. They have a point that guides the cut and keeps them from swimming across the wood like you saw with the other ones. And they even somehow taper the plug to ensure a nice snug fit. Sure, you get a small hole left in the plug from where it's centered itself, but if you've got enough plug exposed, well, you're gonna cut that bit off anyway. £34, $33, and they're imported from the US. For that, we need to be a little bit careful. You need to ensure that you've got a Forstner bit or drill bit that leaves a hole that's compatible with the plug cutters, Imperial and metric. To save you searching for these so that you can test them yourself, I've popped a link in the description. Let me know what you think. And let's not forget, as it is that time of year, at this price point, these would make a particularly good and interesting gift. Just a thought. That was a long section. The rest, I promise, won't be so long. Hey, while I'm here, just check you're subscribed. Thank you. I've recently just completed a pallet wood project, and it has caused me to buy in the next 2 tools. You see, when using pallet wood or reclaimed timber of any kind, you do run into a couple of issues. One is the sheer amount of effort it takes to make the wood usable, and the second one is, well, the risk of damage to your tools. Now, the effort I can't help you with. That's the price of getting free wood. But I can help you to protect your tools from any metal or fixings that are hidden under the surface of the wood. Very simply, grab one of these. I thought that would look a little bit cooler, but it didn't. I can only apologise. Well, this is a handheld metal detector. They come in different shapes and sizes. I found that this one style worked best for me. And it only cost £18, or I think it's $16 in the US. That may sound like a lot, but check how much it costs you to replace the blades in your thickness planer or a blade in your table saw. Then it won't feel like such a big investment. But do not get fooled by the marketing on this one. It will not help you find buried treasure. But for nails and other fixings, this works very well. Now, some of you will be shouting that you could use a strong magnet to find any fixings left in the wood, and, well, you'd be right. However, if you're running it through a table saw and you're going to cut the full depth, a magnet may not find the fixings that are right in the middle of the wood. And those are the ones that will catch you out if you're not careful. Now, the next tool I bought for that project is a bit of a two-parter. Well, 2 tools to solve one problem. But it is also generally good advice too. If you're going to process pallet wood, your table saw is pretty much essential. And your table saw is going to be delivered to you with a stock blade. Mine came with 24 teeth. And I doubt that stock blade is going to stay in your table saw for very long. There are plenty of detailed videos by woodworkers more experienced than me about table saw blades, and I do urge you to do your own research. But for me, here it is in a nutshell. There's 2 types of cuts that you're generally going to do on your table saw. A rip cut along the grain, or a cross cut across the grain. The rip cut is going to need a lower tooth count so that the gullies can remove more waste, whereas a cross cut needs a higher tooth count for a nicer finish. My 24 tooth blade is okay for rough timber that could have any metal fixings you haven't found in it, but that's about it. So, I bought myself 2. Firstly, I wanted that everyday blade, one that's considered to be a good all-rounder. And from what I read, most people are saying a tooth count between 40 and 50 is what you need for this, as that brings you to a sweet spot where you can cope with rip cuts and cross cuts. Now this is the most expensive of the two that I bought. This is a 40 tooth Freud blade, and this is going to cost £43, $45. It is pricey, but it's going to be my everyday blade. But what I also wanted was a blade that would leave a really nice finish on plywood. Generally speaking, this would lead me to changing it in at the start of a project and not needing to change it out until the end. And for that, I'm testing this relatively inexpensive 60 tooth blade from Saxton. Now in the UK, I paid £17 for this blade. Those of you in the US, there are many brands you can choose from. I'll leave a link to a good example. Truth is, this blade would actually work beautifully on crosscuts. But as the all-round blade already does a good job of this, it's going to stay in the drawer for when I'm just using plywood. So that's all the bases covered, and only 2 blades. One last thing to check when you're going out and buying a table saw blade, check the diameter that your table saw accepts. They're all different. But I did promise lots of demonstrations. So let's summarise these with a quick test. So to test the finish left on these blades, I've just kept it really simple. I popped all 3 blades in and I did 3 different types of cuts. Firstly, a rip cut, secondly, a cut through plywood, and then thirdly, a cross cut. Firstly, judging the cross cut. It's hard to see on these results, but you can feel it. The finish left on a cross cut with a 24 tooth blade was rough. The 60 tooth was incredibly smooth, but what made me really happy was that the 40 tooth was almost as good as the 60 tooth. You can easily see that on a rip cut made through pine, the 24 tooth blade leaves a lot of marks. The 40 tooth blade is far from perfect, but it is good. And with ply, nothing touches the 60 tooth blade. Again, the 40 tooth blade is okay, but I suspect when that starts to dull, the 60 tooth blade is going to come into its own. Now, one thing we can all agree on is that no workshop is entirely dust-free. Now, I see dust extraction as a 3-phase system. At the source, in the air, and on your face. If you tick all 3 to the best of your ability, then you're giving yourself the best protection. And it's the third option that I want to talk about in this video. For your face, you need a mask. Well, actually you need 2. I certainly don't put my faith in these or in these. You have to have a good seal around your cheeks, chin and nose. If you want to test your fit, just put your hand over the outflow and breathe out while it's on your face. If you can't without the mask pushing off your face, you've got a really good fit. If you can, you need to readjust. I've got this mask for dust. I bought it because it's inexpensive, it's comfortable, but it's effective, and my glasses don't mist up. And that's important, because that's a really good sign that air is not escaping around the nose. But as I said before, I also have this second mask, as this one's pretty useless against fumes, VOCs and anything that comes off stuff like finishes. So one for dust and one for everything else. The dust mask is £21, $28, and my second mask is $18, £19. But there are many brands. I'll put the 2 that I use down below, so at least once you've done your own research, you can decide if these are the ones for you. Let's stick with the dust theme for a few more minutes. See, even if you're collecting dust at the source and dust in the air, everything you're sanding will still need the fine dust removing from the surface before you can apply finish. I even tend to remove it between grits when I'm swapping them out. What I tend to do is vacuum off the worst of it and then follow up with a tack cloth. And these work brilliantly. I've recommended them before, but they do have their drawbacks. You can get a very slight residue left on the wood from the cloth. And once you've covered every area of your tack cloth in dust, they're not reusable. And that cost can add up. So I've searched around, watched some videos, and I've found microfiber cloths. But I wanted to find out if they worked as well as a tack cloth. So I did a couple of tests. As you can see from that, they're just as effective as a tack cloth, but they can be washed and they can be reused. But if you have rough hands, you're going to learn how Velcro feels. Oof. They're still better. Now the next tool can't have dust extraction attached to it because it's a hand tool. But don't worry, it's a hand tool that I believe all power tool woodworkers should also have. I mean, these are good. I mean, each one can remove wood very effectively and efficiently. And on top of that, they'll leave a pretty good finish. But their effectiveness is nothing like this beast. This is a Japanese style Shinto rasp, and it is by far my favourite way of shaping wood in a hurry. It does have its limitations, and we're going to get to that in a second. The rasp cutting surface is made up of a mesh of what look like larger toothed hacksaw blades. You got coarse, and then you got more coarse. The first surprise is how fast it removes the wood, but the second surprise follows quickly afterwards, and that's the finish it leaves behind. There is a real pleasure to be had in using hand tools, but some do come with quite a steep learning curve. Not this one. All the pleasure, all the results with none of the frustration. And at £20 or $19, it's not even that pricey. The limitation, however, is that it can only really be used on flat surfaces or convex or outside curves. And that's due to the flat surface that you're working with, so inside curves are not possible. So do hang on to a few of these for those situations. I'm going to finish this up with a little bit of an odd one. And it's not so much of a recommendation, more of a you can if you want. And you aren't wrong to if you do, but you don't have to. And that's fine too. That makes sense, right? Well, let me explain. Another one of those tools that every single woodworker needs is a chisel. Or rather a few. And by that I don't mean different styles, unless you're planning on hand cutting mortise joinery or something a little bit more specialist. I believe the average woodworker will get use out of 3, maybe 4 different sized standard style chisels. I got the 25mm, a 10mm and a 6mm. But I didn't start with these lovely Narex Richter lovely Narex Richter chisel. Lovely Narex Richter chisels. It's really hard to say. Narex Richter chisels. I didn't start with them. They are the upgrade that I would recommend down the line. But if you're starting out, you can genuinely get good use out of any chisel you can find. These were £5 each from a supermarket, and they get the job done. Of course, there's always going to be elements of give or take. The cheaper chisels will most likely be made out of a lower grade of steel, and so they just won't hold their edge as long, and they'll get dull quicker. But in truth, if you're getting started and you do buy a cheap set of chisels, well, what that means is you're going to end up sharpening more. And sharpening is definitely something in woodworking that you need to practice and learn. So cheap chisels do have a benefit to other things. So I guess what I'm saying is you don't need these at the start. But when you get to the stage where you feel like you want to upgrade from what you're using, this is a good way to go. You can buy them singly or in a pack of 5 or 6. They come at around £30, $40 each. The quality of the edge that I can get on them and how long it lasts, that's what's won me over with these. But genuinely, if you're on a budget, take whatever you can get and get the most out of it. Feels like a genuinely odd way to close out the video, but I hope that that message comes through in everything that I'm recommending to you. From countersink bits to rasps to chisels to every tool within your workshop, you don't need to buy the most expensive thing. There's 100 people like me on YouTube who will tell you what has worked for us, and a lot of the recommendations will be more expensive than other things you could buy. The fact is, you can get by with any tool that will get the job done in your hands. Practice with what you've got, and only when you can either afford it, or more importantly, you need that tool to get a specific job done, well, that's probably when the best time to buy it is. The truly most important thing in woodworking to remember is just to start making. I know that sounds flippant, and I've been pulled up about the name of the channel many times. The name isn't designed to make you want to go to your workshop and just pick up your tools and make something with no plans. All I ever hope to do with these videos is to inspire people to want to make something, to find the love in woodworking that I've found in it. And that's what I genuinely mean by just start making. This may be the last video of 2024, but there will be a review video of the year coming out in January. So I'm not going to get too deep right now. All I'm going to say is nothing that happens within this workshop would happen without you. I know that, and I want you to know that I know that. But more than that, whether it's the first video you've watched or the 80th, I want you to know that I appreciate every view, every subscribe, every comment, every bit of support, that I genuinely appreciate you, truly. So thank you from me and mine to you and yours, and I wish you happiness and health in whatever it is you're doing this time of year. Merry Christmas, and thank you.